What's up, marketers, and welcome to another episode of the Growth Colony podcast. I'm Liza from Xgrowth to tell you that each episode we bring in B2B leaders to chat about how you can achieve those everyday wins in the marketing world. Whether you're new to the B2B game, working at a leadership level, or even just showing some interest, we know you'll love the episode. So grab a drink, get comfy, and enjoy the show.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. I'm Shahin with Xgrowth, and today I'm talking to Avishai Sharon, CEO at Trendemon, about personalization and the state of digital experiences. So one of the things that is on the mind of a lot of people is, how do I become more relevant, more personalized for the companies that I'm going after? How do I offer a more personalized experience? Definitely digitally, because that's more scalable for a lot of our audiences. And I'm excited to speak to Avishai today about what kind of trends he's seeing in the market, what is working and what is not working. So stay tuned, get your notepads out. We're going to drop a lot of insights here. Avishai, thanks a lot for joining the show.
Thanks, Shahin, for having me. It's a pleasure.
No, it's great. I'm super excited. This is, this whole concept of personalization digitally. Some people are like, "Oh, digital is not working anymore. We're not getting the results that we want anymore." And our ROI is dropping, and we can't hit our targets anymore. I want to first touch on what you're seeing in the sense of the digital personalization within the B2B marketing. How has the landscape evolved, particularly this year, compared to previous years?
Sure. So I suggest we zoom out a bit, and maybe even before we jump into talk about personalization is part of experience optimization, right? So it's a subdivision of that entire topic. And for many, many years, B2B, being kind of the smaller, let's say less evolved brother of B2C marketing, was kind of inheriting, right, all those different approaches of experience optimization, right? So you had A/B testing, and then, B2B marketers had to use that. But there was a big problem in that inheritance, because B2B works by different rules. It's, for example, smaller numbers. So if a B2C marketer were to run A/B tests, you have huge volumes of data, you have lots of visitors, you can do a lot of those experimental testing. In B2B, that doesn't really work that well. You have very small groups, small segments. Everything is very different. And so I think what we've seen over the past few years is the understanding that it's not just enough to inherit tools and approaches from B2C and do it at a smaller scale. That's not kind of getting B2B digital marketing effective. We have to rethink about what B2B marketing is, how it's different, and then look at the tools and the approaches that we need. And I think this is one of the shifts that we're seeing: more dedicated B2B, not just tools, but methodologies and approaches that help kind of overcome challenges of effectiveness, of measurement, and all of that stuff. So I think that's definitely something that I'm excited to see and evolve, that B2B is kind of growing into its own, rather than just being that younger sibling that is just kind of trying to catch up. They understand they need different approaches. And I think experience optimization is a part of that entire process, of go-to-market process. And when we're talking about, and I agree with you, I think things are not working. They're not working. We're seeing the results. We're seeing companies struggling. Seeing it, of course, in the recent downturn, but even before that, things are not working as we would expect. And that is something that digital experiences have a role, but we have to, again, look at the wider picture. Why isn't that working as a whole, right? We cannot break this problem just by looking at the different pieces. So yeah, we'll happy to dive into what I think could be one of the reasons, or several reasons, and what could be things that marketers could do to really make sure that they're building an effective machine, essentially. I think this is what we're all after: building something that we are able to predict and repeat and convey to our superiors and our leadership, that basically gets us to understand ROI and impact, right? Which is something that marketing has always struggled with, I think.
I'm just taking some notes as you're talking about. I definitely want to touch on some of the methodologies that you see coming out in the B2B space. Definitely want to talk about the machine as well and building the machine. Maybe let's touch on why you think some of these digital experiences are not working. I'd love to get your thoughts on the why before we dive into how to fixing it.
Right. So I think I got into marketing almost 20 years ago, and it was a very, I think straightforward premise. It said for marketers, get us leads, capture those leads. We will push them to SDRs who will then convert them into sales opportunities, and then we're going to have pipeline. It is more of like this factory approach that says, okay, let's just push a lot of this volume in, whatever that volume is, call it leads, MQLs, whatever you want to call it. Let's just push that volume in. And on the other side, at some conversion rate, you're going to get money out. And we all grew on that predictable revenue and that beautiful theory. The big problem is it doesn't work. Yeah, we understand that it doesn't work. You can push as many leads as you want. You can force people to fill forms, or you can capture leads or scrape them or do whatever you want. It's not going to get you any closer to a deal. And so I think marketers are realizing that this is something that's fundamentally broken. It's not something that requires incremental, nuanced change. It's something that needs to look at this whole machine and says, okay, this stuff that may have worked in the past before, buyers had the power to lead their own journey, before the information was at the seller. It worked because the buyer had to talk to a sales rep in order to understand what your company was doing. Today, that's not the case. They're surrounded by information. And if they're surrounded by information from your competitors, they're going to go to your competitors because they understand what your competitors do better than what your company does. So that machine is fundamentally broken. And the reason we know this is that there's this big disconnect between how much money is getting in and how much value is getting out. And that's why when you're seeing downturns, CFOs have no problem slashing marketing budgets by 50%, yet keeping the same goals. Because they're saying, hey, it doesn't really matter. You're a cost center, right? So what does it matter if I cut 50 or 30 or 70%? But I still want you to reach those goals, or I want the company to reach those business goals, right? And that's paradoxical because if it is a rigorous process, then how are we actually connecting investments to outputs? I think this really is the fundamental problem of B2B marketing. And I think we're looking now and we're understanding now that we need to, again, rethink this whole mechanism of what a marketer should be doing, how it should be measured and connected to outcomes. And I think that's a challenge. That's also what's exciting, because we're in this process of writing a new playbook. And I think this is what gets me excited beyond, the general hypes of AI and LLM, which, everybody loves. And we love that too. It's a new shiny toy and everybody's chasing that. And that's fine. But if you think about it, at the end of the day, the two endpoints haven't changed and they're human. They haven't evolved, right? We don't have better CPUs. We're not augmenting our brains. So the 2 points, the marketer and the buyer, are still human. They still need to connect in some way. That hasn't changed. Maybe the way there has become a bit different or more advanced or scalable. That's why I actually always love going back to basics rather than just say, okay, this will solve our problem. Okay, we have AI that will solve our broken demand gen engine. AI is not going to solve your broken demand gen engine.
So, Michelle, let's dive in terms of, you talk about changing the playbook. What are some of these changes that you see coming or you're implementing yourself? What are some of these, maybe not that they're not modifications, because we talked about it's not about tweaking, right? It's about really rewriting the playbook. What is working right now?
So I think I can share from our experience, from our failures, that kind of forced us to really look back and say, if I'm looking at this machine, how do I really assess where should I invest my time? What should I build or fix, right? What if all this operation works, and then build on top of that the processes. So just to kind of break it down, we're looking at two layers. We have a foundational layer, and then we have the operational layer, the processes. If you're trying to build an operational layer on top of a foundational layer that's lacking, that's going to break. If you have a good foundational layer, but you don't have a good process, that's also not going to work. So let's start breaking this down. What is this foundational layer? When I look at a go-to-market, what are the three main things I need to make sure that I have before I'm trying to build any type of machine on top of it? right? Any type of demand gen, lead or revenue or go-to-market machine. I think that's the first part is really identity of who your buyer is, a very clear understanding of your target audience. If you don't have that, it really doesn't make any sense to build anything on top of that because you don't know who you're speaking to. The second part is clarity of offering, the positioning and messaging of what you do. That's something that we've internally in Trendemon missed, I think, for quite a long time, because we were trying to build either a new category or we were trying to address investors and you're trying to build a new story, and all that's fine. But marketers, if they or buyers, right? If they don't understand what you do very quickly and they're not able to position you very quickly and understand who your competitors are, they're just going to move on. They're not going to have any bandwidth to understand, to take the time to understand what you do if they don't get it like this. So that's the second part, the clarity of message, proposition, positioning. That is fundamental. And then the third part is this ability to consistently create valuable content that isn't about your product, that isn't about your specific technology or offering or how great you are. It is about topics, interests, challenges, opportunities, podcasts like this that talk about the fundamentals rather than a solution or a technology, a specific area. So that's a fundamental layer. So you need to understand who your market is. You got to understand to describe yourself in very clear terms in the value proposition and positioning. And you have to be able to consistently create valuable content for that audience that you've defined, right? That's the fundamental layer. And then on top of that, we have mechanisms. We have mechanisms which, if in the past we looked at them as demand gens, that, okay, let's capture leads. And then we have this funnel approach that looks at converting leads, MQLs, SQLs, and close one. I think a different approach would look at this as these two independent activities that need to coexist and that they're correlated, not necessarily directly linked in causation. And I will explain what I mean by that. So if you're trying to think about this kind of funnel, that if I have this, I will get on the other side, that I think is no longer the case. But what can we do to make something more predictable? Because we're trying to build something that we can justify in terms of investments to our CFO or leadership. So the way I would suggest looking at it is really understanding how you're able to engage your target audience with valuable content consistently, right? If we're talking about that fundamental layer of content, you have to be in touch with your audience consistently, because 95% of your target market is not going to be in the market to buy your product at any given time, right? We know that only 5% are actually going to look to buy your product. So does that mean I don't need to talk to those 95%? No, because the 5% that are in the market, a vast majority of them have already made their mind who they're going to buy from when they get in the market. So that's too late. I think that really is the big gap, that when you're trying to focus on that 5% of intentful buyers, that is too late. So we're talking about those 95% of your not in market buyers that you need to engage consistently with valuable content. So that's mission one, that has to be executed and measured to know if you're actually capturing the attention of your target audience. And then the other part is identifying intent to be able to have more of a lagging indicator. So we look at intent as a lagging indicator, not a leading indicator. Intent to your product means you've done everything right. That's the outcome. The outcome is that at one point, somebody is going to say, hey, actually, these folks that have this content actually could solve our problem because we know exactly what they do. We know who their competitor landscape is, and we trust them because we've been reading their content for the past 6 months. So let's reach out to them and let's book a demo. And that kind of moves the shifts from this outbound approach of having SDRs just kind of pound anybody that shows any type, not of intent, of just existing, right? So if somebody visited your site and read your blog, the SDR is like, okay, they're ready to buy, or they downloaded an ebook. Why would they want to buy your product if they downloaded an ebook on marketing trends, on our new methodologies? It doesn't make any sense, right? And so if we're looking at those top processes, we have this content engine that needs to be really built and rigorous. And we have this intent listening device that is helping us really uncover who is in the market, because and again, I think that's even the less important part of this machine, because if we've done our job correctly, the 80% are going to just come to us. We're not going to have to pull them in through SDRs. They're going to come, they're going to understand what we do, and they're going to want to speak with us. There is going to be that 20% that may need that nudge, and that SDR sending that contact or that content and maybe kind of pushing them forward could help get them across the finish line from anonymous to known and make that first contact. So this is how I would suggest kind of thinking about this new playbook that isn't adversarial to the buyers, but it actually supports them. And I think for many times it was the marketers against the buyers. We are trying to uncover them. We're trying to get them to leave their contact. Everything is like this, again, this us against them approach. And I don't think that's very effective because buyers have the power. You're not going to be able to win over the buyer. If the buyer doesn't want to download something, they won't. If they don't want to pick up the phone and speak to sales, they won't speak. So if we're not able to acknowledge that, we're still going to kind of bash against the wall and just trying to kind of force those things. And they actually create more damage because it will damage our brand. It will damage kind of how we're perceived. And at the end of the day, when the company is going to be in the market, say, okay, I'm not sure we want to speak to these guys. They've been all over us, and I don't know if we'll be able to escape them again. So,
one of the questions that I had was talking about the gated versus ungated content, and I feel like you touched on that, where it sounds like you are completely in the ungated camp. Is that fair to say?
Yes, completely. Because, and again, think about LLM. LLM has made it so easy and cheap to create huge amounts of content. So our attention deficit, which was already very challenging. So our ability to consume information is always challenged. There's so much information. The thought that I would still need to do another thing to get more information, I think that's something that is just not relevant anymore. I think there's always begs the question, why are we doing this? Why are we gating this? Why are marketers gating content? And I think if you break it down, it's maybe they have a leads quota that they need to generate, right? They need to capture leads. And if they're doing that, they're doing a disservice for two reasons. The leads don't matter. And the people who you actually care about won't download that content that could be actually really valuable. So this is like a dual problem there. And most actual buyers are not going to fill any forms or fill for any content until they're actually ready to expose themselves. And we see this from the data. We see about 95% of the buyer journey is in the dark, is anonymous. And think about the fact that the buying committee, if we're just kind of opening another side bracket, that there isn't a buyer, it's a buying group. It could consist of anywhere from 7 to 13 people if you're selling mid-market and above. And most of that buying group is going to remain anonymous. They're not going to fill any form, but this content could be really instrumental for them to take a decision about whether to engage your company or explore your product. If you're preventing them from accessing this or knowing your company, it's, like I said, it's a disservice to the company and the brand itself. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in non-getting. Of course, there are cases and there are areas that could work. Again, every industry and every go-to-market has their nuances. I think as a whole, we're going into more enabler, so marketers as enablers, educators, rather than lead capturers, which was kind of where we came from, right? In events, you had the booth, you would give away the swag for what? For business cards. What were those business cards? People who wanted the drone or wanted to get some swag had no relevance about their intentions or intent to buy or even interest in a topic. They wanted to get some, teddy bear for their kid.
Yeti mug.
Stayed back home. Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Avishai, what are your thoughts? Or maybe let me rephrase this. How are you approaching content creation with the introduction of LLMs? How are you approaching it differently now? I mean, we definitely touched on the gated versus non-gated, but what other factors are you taking into consideration? What changes have you made in the organization or with people that you work with when it comes to content strategy?
I think that I think LLM, if we're kind of trying to understand why this is so revolutionary, at least why I think this is such a major revolution, we're looking at the output, right? The ability for it to create content or rephrase or create blog posts and LinkedIn posts very quickly and very eloquently. And I think that is very exciting. I'm looking at it from actually the other side of the LLM's ability to understand topics and context and intent in a scalable way that otherwise would have required an analyst to go. And let me give you an example of things that we're doing, for example, at Trendemon. So one of the ways that we're leveraging LLM is to look at a buyer journey. So we're actually ingesting all the pages that a visitor has read. So we're looking at their touch points, the pages they've read at the account level. So not just an individual, but what the account has been consuming. And that can then be fed through the LLM to be able to generate a very clear summary for a sales rep, an account executive, or a marketer that says this account is interested in so-and-so. These are the topics they're interested in. And by the pages that they've read, this is the potential intent of buying to your product. So how much of that content really is relevant or connected to your offering as opposed to general content. So let's say I was just reading 5 blog posts on different trends and not a single post or a single page on your product or your pricing or competitor pages. So now we have this deep level of understanding of a journey of content that can now be scaled. So I'm actually more interested in the listening capability rather than the speaking or the generating capability of LLM.
And is that based on first party data, third party data, combination of the two? Basically saying that, hey, we know this account has been reading about these topics and kind of consuming these things on different digital platforms, but also on they've been consuming these digital assets that are first party and you produce it. How are you kind of what kind of data sources are kind of going in there?
So I think the primary is website first party because it's just very underutilized. I don't think many companies are actually looking at what accounts are doing on their site and leveraging it into a workflow, right? Maybe they have a report that says, these are the companies that visited you the past week or past month. Great. That really doesn't give me any context or understanding of priorities or help me personalize or help me kind of build, again, processes and workflows. But it's not just first party website data. Think about second party. And when I talk about second party, we're talking about your LinkedIn page, right? We're talking about the company page. So second party are the company's assets that are not self-hosted. So think of your review page, right? These are assets you're maintaining and you're nurturing, but they're not your own. So it could be a G2, it could be Catering, it could be any review site that you have a page on. It could be a signal, a very important signal that you want to feed into kind of that entire equation. And then third party is something that I think we're going to see. Again, we have third party cookies deprecating, so it's going to be, of course, more and more challenging to really make those different connections. So we're actually looking at first and second party, but there's just such a wealth of information to be gained from the website and content, first of all, before we have to start kind of building or even kind of the farther view there.
Interesting. Okay. I want to also talk about success metrics. In terms of what you are seeing organizations kind of reporting to show the ROI on the assets that they create, on the personalization that they do for different accounts. How are kind of organizations measuring that and then reporting up?
Yeah, I think for us, this has been particularly an important challenge because we're dealing with experience optimization. Now, these are very fluffy terms when you think about experience and optimization. They're things that, you try to tell the CFO or the CEO that you're buying an experience optimization platform. They're like, oh God, not another tool. So the necessity to prove impact in clear business terms that a CFO will understand and accept for us was fundamental. So that was something we took very seriously because that was really our justification for, renewals and so forth. And so the way that we're looking at it at Trendemon is through a constantly comparative approach. And what we're doing is actually pretty straightforward, and it can be done not just for personalization or experience optimization, but to understand channels performance, content performance. Pretty much you can use this framework to measure anything that you want on the website. And the idea is very simple. We're taking two populations, one that has been affected by whatever we are doing, our experience optimization, certain content that came from a certain channel. We're looking at that specific group and we're comparing it to the non-optimized group. So we always have this affected or non-affected groups. And we're connecting those two groups into a business outcome. For example, conversion to deal. So one of our main metrics at Trendemon is the uplift that experience optimization has generated on conversion to deals. So we take a visiting account, anonymous. It doesn't even have to be identified, but we look at the account and we look at the experiences people from that account have had on the website. And then we compare and we look at the conversion rate to a deal in Salesforce. So we now have a group of companies that had personalized experiences versus another group that didn't have personalized experiences. And we're looking at the conversion rate to deals. How many of those companies have a deal associated in Salesforce? What is the value of those deals? How many and so forth. And so you now have these two perspectives of qualitative that says what is the uplift that a personalized experience versus a non-personalized experience has yielded. And that's something that's very easy to demonstrate. You're seeing these two populations and you're seeing the delta. And then you have the quantitative. How much money was really affected, was influenced? And these are the two answers you would need to go back to CFO, CEO and say, look, we invested in this content or this tool or this channel. We've looked at these two populations. They have been showing significantly higher conversion rates to our business goals that we all agree on, which is pipeline, okay? Or even close one, you can connect it down to the revenue level if you want. And this is the depth of it, the level of impact. And if we're seeing that the scope, maybe it's too small, maybe we want to increase it. And then again, like I said, take it to content. We've created a new section on our site. We think it's, the best thing since sliced bread. So we're starting to see people that go through it versus those that didn't, or accounts that engage with it versus those that didn't. And we need to ask ourselves, is this incrementally better than the control group versus the optimized group? So you're constantly measuring those different populations and looking for that incremental change between them. I think it's a better approach than just kind of tagging everything or just saying, okay, we've generated so or other performance metrics that I've seen. This is the approach we use. We do QBRs with our customers to look at those metrics together to make sure that we're being accountable for them, and that the marketer is saying, yes, this is what we need to show up to show that value.
Interesting. Avishai, can we go through a case study that maybe you've recently seen implemented that you're like, this is what I think the new content experience should be on digital platform. This is what personalization should be. Does anything come to mind in terms of a case study or an example that we can dive a little bit deeper into?
Sure. Yeah, I think that if we're looking at how we're able to, first of all, determine, does it make sense to invest in personalization? Because it is an investment, not just in technology, it's in time, it's in content creation, building those experiences. So for any successful outcome from personalization, you first have to really understand, do you have the fundamentals right? Because again, it's optimization. It's optimizing a certain potential, right? It isn't creating something new. So do we have that potential that an investment in it would yield a significant demonstrable uplift? And those fundamentals really are, at least in the website experience optimization space, the way we suggest our customers or marketers to look at this is, again, from the acquisition perspective. Are we getting enough ICPs coming to our owned assets? And do we have enough content to support a journey throughout the website? Do we have then some conversion that's happening at the other end, right? So if we're looking at, are we able to attract the right buyers in? Are they really engaging with our content versus just coming into our request a demo page and then booking a demo or just quickly bouncing? So are they reaching goals after engaging with our content? These are the first questions that I would ask, and we would need to see some critical mass. What is critical mass? Well, in B2B, it's usually a few thousand visitors. Let's say I probably expect a few thousand companies visiting the website in a month for something to be able to squeeze more value out of that. And we would try to look for journeys that have more than 3 pages. So typical journeys that of companies who are engaged that have 3 or more pages that they're actually read. If you have that, then you can then say, okay, I think there's good potential to optimize and really kind of start scaling that machine. But I have the foundation nailed. And then the first steps, I think, would be baby steps. Start with kind of don't try to address 5 different or 10 different segments. Maybe try 2 different segments. And like I said about the measurement, try to see if there's an incremental improvement with those experiences versus the non-optimized. That will give you the confidence to then invest and double down and really be able to have this buy-in of the organization of why should we invest in this? Why should we take the time to create personalized experience? Well, we can see this demonstrable uplift, right? That we can show between group A to group B. It makes sense to invest in this. This is generating, and if you want numbers, we're seeing anywhere from 3x improvements in conversion rates to the higher end was 30x, which was a complete outlier to close one. But anywhere in that range, it's in the X's. It's not 5%, 10%, 20% improvement. These are 30, 300, 400, 500% improvement. And I'll tell you a secret. Most B2B companies are still not doing it. So you have a real opportunity of outmaneuvering your competitors because a lot of them still have very shitty websites and shitty experiences. And so that's something that, if you're just doing the basics right, you can really capture a good part of attention. And this is what we're talking about, not about trying to sell through personalization, but trying to capture attention and give value to be able to occupy a space in a buyer's mind that when the time comes for them to consider your product, they have that allocated kind of unit, that memory unit that says, okay, this company does this and I trust them, check, let's talk to them. That's it. That's all you need for that to happen.
Actually, I want to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions. But before we dive into rapid fire questions, is there anything else on personalization that you think is important for us to touch on that maybe I haven't asked?
I think we covered a good part. I would
a good chunk.
I would just say, yeah. I think the only thing I would just in terms of that shift, that mind shift that we talked about in terms of changing playbook, is really see that you're listening, because personalization feels like I need to create more content. I need to write more. I need to change more elements on a page. That kind of the notion when we think about personalization is about that doing stuff. And I would only, again, just iterate on that listening part, which is even more important. So when I mean listening, really understand what your audience connects with in terms of topics before you rush and try to hyper-personalize a landing page. That is not going to get you to nail your go-to-market if you change the color or change an image or, the call to action button. Nobody cares about that, really. That isn't, for me, that isn't personalization. That is those tiny tweaks. Personalization is about contextual conversation, right? Asking, listening, communicating, and it's essentially communication at scale. This is what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to have multiple conversations with people, and have intelligent conversations in a scalable way. And this is, I think, the way that I would suggest looking at it rather than just kind of the tactics or the tools or widgets.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a great point. Okay, let's do some rapid fire questions. First question I have, what is a book? What is a resource? This could be a book, a podcast, a talk, whatever it is that has had a fundamental impact on the way you work or live.
Okay, so I think from the entrepreneurial perspective, I think the book that had the most impact on me was Ben Horowitz's The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Just kind of getting a sense that we're all going through crap. And that was just kind of very good to see that even somebody like him had to eat his share of crap. I think from a professional perspective, again, I always like to look outside from our immediate domain. So there's a good book called Team of Teams by Stanley McChrystal, General. And he was really talking about breaking down this whole organization into very small organic teams. And I think especially for sales and marketing, this is very true. This ability to work not just in a kind of a factory production line where somebody's just passing material from one step to another, but really working in those organic teams, maybe around accounts at the industry level or account level. So you have these units working together. So I think this is how you win.
I love it. Second question, if you could give one advice to B2B marketers, what would it be?
I think just step into each other's shoes. So one of the things that happened to me recently was just going on sales calls. So I would typically take a more marketing role. And then as I took that part in sales conversations, I realized we were missing our messaging. People would go on those sales calls and not really understand what we were doing. And I think that is something that a marketer can only understand when they're in front of a person, that when the sales rep is actually asking them, why did you reach out? And they're giving something completely different. That's like a wake-up call. And you can only understand that when you are in those conversations. So for marketers, really is step into those conversations, take active part in them. And for sales, it's also take part in that crafting of content. What are we writing about? What are we trying to educate our buyers? What are things that they're interested in? They have a ton of knowledge that could be used in marketing as well. So ABM is a lot about sales and marketing alignment. And it's a good theory. In practice, it's really, really hard. But it's definitely something that I would urge them to really kind of work cohesively together in very small units and just kind of just do those switches, try to see it from the other side.
Amazing. Avishai, this has been an amazing call, an amazing chat. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and thank you very much for sharing all the insights. I took heaps of notes, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Shahin. It was a pleasure. And looking forward to connecting. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and reach out. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Today's episode of Growth Colony was produced by Alexander Hipwell and Liza Maywald. It was edited by Dave Samito with additional editing by Liza Maywald and music arrangement by Alexander and Liza. Special thanks to Tina Wabe. We couldn't make the show without you. Growth Colony is hosted by Shahin Hoda, Director of Growth at Xgrowth. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Do you think you'd be a great guest or just keen for a chat? Send through an email at podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's all for now. We'll catch you next week, right here on Growth Colony.